No, my cross will probably be as long as directed. You know, if this was time for a break, or just wait until I'm done with cross. I need a few minutes with exhibits, but up to the jury.
Up to the jury. Does anybody need a break at this time? No? Okay. We'll wait.
Maybe a couple minutes for some exhibits, and I'll be ready. Morning, sir.
Morning.
Don't really want to be here, do you?
I guess it has to be done.
Sure. You were very reluctant to be involved in the case at all, correct?
Correct.
Had only been one of the witnesses who requested that your anonymity be continued because of your concerns about your involvement in the case?
Correct.
You understand that though we were able to accomplish that up until today, or I guess openings, that we couldn't do it because of the way the process works.
Correct.
Still willing, of course, as you are, to come here and tell us as best you can recall what you said and what you saw both that night and what you've told other people, correct?
Yes.
Let's then talk about that night, and Mr. Delagranda walked you through it. I want to try and do it after defining some of the terms that you used to make sure that it's very clear. You're watching TV, correct? And
Yes.
you first hear some noise outside that gets your attention, correct?
Yes.
And I think you said that was sort of this noise or yells or something, wasn't it?
I didn't say yells.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
I just said a noise in the distance.
Okay. May I first look at tomorrow? And just to orient both you and the jury, I'm going to look at this from behind you. It's been identified that you live here, correct, or lived there back
Correct.
then. And that I think you said the noise came from as you're looking out which way when you first heard the noise.
When I first heard the noise,
Yeah.
I wasn't looking out, so I couldn't tell which way it came from.
Could you tell at all from what direction?
Just that it was faint and seemed like it was getting closer.
Okay. Could it have been from this area, for example?
I thought we weren't speculating.
I'm just asking what your opinion is. It could have been.
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Okay. So that got your attention enough that you turned off or muted the TV, right?
I muted the TV, correct?
Okay. And then what was the very next thing that caught your attention?
I heard it again, but it seemed like it was getting a little louder.
Could you tell at that point where it was coming from?
It just seemed like it was getting closer
Okay.
to where I was.
And in response to that, what'd you do?
That's when we muted the TV again, and I proceeded to the sliding glass door.
So there was a time in between the two where you turned the TV down because of the first noise, turned the TV back on.
Yes.
And do you recall about how long of a time that was between the two?
No.
Could you have said previously that it was maybe a couple of minutes?
Well, you were wanting a time frame, so yes.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had said it was a couple of minutes, right?
Sure.
Okay. Does that sound about right still?
I guess, like I said, we weren't keeping track of time, so it
Sure.
could have been a couple minutes.
All right. And then the next noise got your attention. You muted the TV again, and what else did you do?
That's when we muted the TV and I went to the sliding glass door.
Okay. And looked outside, and I want you to say again what you saw, but then I'm going to ask you to break a little bit along the way because I want to define some terms, okay? So when you first looked out after that second noise, what did you see?
I couldn't really tell what was out there.
Okay. Tell us as best you can your view and what it was.
Like I said, I couldn't tell what was actually out there, so that's when I opened the sliding glass door, opened the screen, and took a step out to see what was going on to get a better view.
Okay. And tell us what you saw.
It looked like I said, maybe possibly a dog tussle, but I could only see one person out there at that time.
You used the terms vertical, horizontal, and I want to just sort of clarify those so that we're on the same page. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use horizontal as being laying flat on the ground. Okay?
Well, that's your perception of it. If you're looking at them, that would be horizontal a different way.
Okay, that's why I want to clear it up. I'm going to suggest and see if we can agree for this conversation that horizontal would mean that they're laying on the ground flat. I'm not saying anyone was yet, we'll get to that, but that the term horizontal means basically you are laying on the ground flat.
They were laying on the ground.
Okay. And then vertical would be, as I am now, standing up vertical, and we'll get to some more in a minute, but right now, can we agree that I'm standing up vertically?
Correct.
Okay. With that in mind, as best you can, describe the scene that you saw from your perspective. And first tell me about how far away this was that you were looking at.
It was closer to the sidewalk, but not on the sidewalk.
Okay, about 15, 20 feet?
I guess, yes.
Okay. If the sidewalk was about 20 feet away from your porch to the sidewalk was about 20 feet, would that be close to accurate?
20 feet from the slab of concrete on my porch
Yes.
to the sidewalk?
Yes.
I guess.
Okay. Let's use that for now, and we'll see how we can tie that up in a little bit.
Okay.
About how far then, was it about that 20 feet, almost to the pathway or the concrete path?
Yeah, it was close to the sidewalk.
Okay. And again, tell me now, using the terms we've agreed to, what was it that you remember seeing?
They were laying on the ground, and if you fell back vertically, that's how I would be looking at them.
So if I was on my back vertically, that was one of the people?
That was how I could see it. But
Okay.
the one on that I could see in the beginning, his back was towards me, but facing downward.
Okay. Well, let me say it like this, if I might approach it somewhat. The person that you could see, you said you saw his back?
Mm-hmm.
Was he like this?
At the beginning, no.
Okay. How was he? And just sort of point me how he was when you first saw him.
You'd have to go all the way to the ground.
Over more. Like that?
No. It was more just flat on flat.
Okay. So one person horizontal on top of the other?
Correct.
Okay. And then when did that change?
When it moved up to the sidewalk.
Okay. So as we now move closer to the sidewalk, what is the positioning of the two, or what you see?
It happened very quick,
Okay.
but that's when it was at more of a straddle position once it got onto the sidewalk.
And when you say straddle, can you explain that in more detail?
Do we get another
If you wish.
visual?
Sure.
No, I'm okay.
Let's try it this way. I want to do it so not just you get to embarrass me, but the jury gets to see it as well.
No, it was more just the person on top's legs were over the person on the bottom that was laying flat on the ground.
Okay. So now the person on top is in fact like this over the person on the bottom?
I would say that's accurate.
Okay. And the person on the bottom was laying flat?
Correct.
Could you tell if he was on his back or not?
He was on his back.
He was on his back. At this point, what's the person on the back wearing? I'm sorry, the person on the top whose back you can see wearing?
It was the same person that was on the top when they were T-shaped to the sidewalk.
Okay, so they did
dark
not.
colors.
I'm sorry. They did not change positions, did they?
No.
Except one, the one on top in the black, actually instead of laying down on the guy on the bottom, was now straddling him, correct?
Correct.
And they are now closer to the cement pathway, correct?
They would be on the cement at that point.
On the cement. And what movement were you, I want you to sort of walk us through that, but at the point now, tell me when your focus of attention is really on what they're doing. Is it at this point with the straddling?
Well, it was on the entire time, but like I said, it was only probably 8 to 10 seconds from what I remember because it was so quick.
You
But
had said, I'm sorry, you were saying?
But when they were on the concrete, the position was with arm movement going downward.
From the time that you were first stepped out to watch them until the time you turned back around was about 8 to 10 seconds, correct?
I would say because it was very quick.
So
it
8 to
wasn't-
10 seconds?
Yeah, it wasn't a long time, no.
Okay. Mr. Delaround asked you if it could have been as little as 2, and I thought you said yes, but it was a lot more than 2, wasn't it?
I didn't state the entire thing was 2 seconds, no.
Let's do that then. The entire time that you were actually watching what was going on,
8 to 10 seconds
8 to 10
probably.
seconds.
Yes.
And that's when you had your focus specifically on what turned out to be, as we now know, Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, right?
Correct.
You didn't know it then, but now we know who they were.
Yes.
So 8 to 10 seconds you were watching them do whatever was happening.
I would say yes.
Okay. And you were talking about a movement or a struggle that you saw. Tell me more about that. What did you see?
At the beginning or the end or the whole thing?
Beginning, at the beginning.
Like I said, when I walked out, it looked like it was only one person. Then I could see a second person, and it looked more of just a tussle. And that's when I thought it got serious, when it moved up to the sidewalk and he was more in a straddle position and arm movements were going downward. But I couldn't 100% say those were actually strikes or if they were just arm movement going downward.
Of course, because you are trying, as you testify here today, to be extraordinarily literal, aren't you? Be very careful that what you say is only what you saw.
Well, that would have been through the whole thing because that's the same thing I said in a deposition.
Sure. And even in your initial statement, when you first had an opportunity to talk to an officer about this, the very first time, you explained as best you can recall what you saw, right?
Correct.
And what you saw was the person on top in an MMA-style straddle position, correct?
Correct.
That was further described, was it not, as being ground and pound,
Correct.
right? What is ground and pound, as you
That's
define
usually
it?
what takes place in that type of position.
Sure. So MMA, to the extent that you're aware of it, and MMA is mixed martial arts,
Correct.
you knew it enough to start giving terminology like ground and pound to what you saw, right?
It was the first thing that came to my mind, yes.
That the person on top was ground and pounding the person on the bottom?
That's what it looked like, yes.
So, explain what ground and pound is in your mind.
The person on top being able to punch the person on the bottom, but the person on the bottom also has a chance to get out or punch the person on top. It's back and forth.
Sure. And which is the dominant position?
It would be the top position.
Because why?
For most people, that would be the dominant position.
Because you're on top of the other person, right?
Usually that's a positive, I would think.
Sorry, it distracted me a bit, so I want to make sure it didn't distract the jury, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to go back, even though I know that you answered it, I didn't fully absorb it. So let's just start by telling me again what ground and pound is.
It's usually when the person's on top in a mounted position, I believe, in the dominant position. But like I said, the person on the bottom is able to, get out of that position or, throw punches back. But I did not see any of that.
Okay. The dominant position of being on top is because you actually have all of your weight on the person's hips, right, holding them down?
Correct.
And from that position, the person on the bottom really can't move very much and can't get very much movement or very much leverage, can they?
I guess that depends on the type of person that's on the bottom.
Sure. And how well trained they are in MMA, right?
I don't know if you have to be trained, but I'm sure some other things come into play. I don't know.
Okay. Yet the person on top in that dominant position then has his arms free, right?
Correct.
Might have the person on the bottom's arms actually under his knees in that position, right?
What objective speculation versus at the scene or MMA in general?
Well, at the scene, speculation sustained as to MMA, I think you need to lay a better bracket.
Sure. I mean, you've watched MMA fights enough to know what ground and pound is, right?
Sure.
And in certain ground and pound positions, they can actually, the person in the dominant position on top can actually get the guys in the bottom arms under his knees so that he virtually has free access to rain blows down upon him, right?
Well, I would think that would mean his arms were above his head or close to his head, but no, I don't know.
Okay. Nonetheless, the person on top has his arms free, correct?
Correct.
And in this, now let's go to this case that night that you saw. The person who you now know to be Trayvon Martin was on top, correct?
Correct.
And he was the one who was raining blows down on the person on the bottom, George Zimmerman, right?
That's what it looked like.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, and I said a moment ago you were literal because you couldn't actually see fist hit face, right?
No.
Because it was blocked by what?
I didn't say it was blocked. I said it was dark out.
Okay. And you were looking at Trayvon Martin's back, right? Wasn't that what was towards you?
Incorrect.
Then
On
tell
the
me what it was.
sidewalk, they're side to me because they're laying on the sidewalk, which would be going lateral to my
Oh,
house.
that's right. When they
parallel.
I'm sorry. By the time they got up to the sidewalk, they had sort of moved into a position where it was a little bit more. You can see what would have been George's left side or right side.
It would have been his right arm.
Okay. His right arm was towards you, and then Trayvon Martin's left side would have been a bit more towards you, right?
Correct.
And then that's when you saw him striking down.
That's when it looked like, yes, arm movement going downward. Correct.
How many times do you think? If you had
I
to
have
guess?
no idea. As soon as I saw the movement going downward, that's when I turned around and went back inside.
That's when you knew it was very serious?
Yes, it looked like it was getting serious, and it wasn't just someone playing around.
And that's when you can hear George Zimmerman screaming for help, right?
Incorrect.
What was it? When was it?
That was in the beginning when I finally saw someone under the person on top.
And I apologize for not asking the question the right way. When was the first time that you heard the person on the bottom scream for help?
When I initially went outside, didn't see a second person, then I could see a second person, and it sounded like it was coming from the person on the bottom, because usually when someone's on top, the person on the bottom is the one screaming or yelling. And that was when I heard that, but I didn't hear anything after that.
Okay. And balancing, you're trying to be literal and just tell us exactly what you remember observing and using your common sense. Do you think that it was the person on the bottom who was screaming for help?
I mean, rationally thinking, I would think so.
Okay. Matter of fact, I think you said in response to Mr. Delarounde's question, had it been Trayvon Martin screaming for help, since his back was to you, it would have had to be going, the yell would be going away from you, and I think you said it would have to bounce off the wall before you heard
I mean, I
it.
think it would sound different.
Okay.
That's why in my head I thought it was coming from the person on the bottom.
And the sound that you heard was sounding like a person screaming from 15 or 17 feet away, almost directly at you, right?
It sounded like it was coming towards me, correct.
Okay. Now, and I'm sorry to jump back to that. I apologize. So they are now moved up. They're now in the true ground and pound position. And Mr. Delarounde, I think, made some histrionics about what you heard and what you didn't hear. So I now have to do it as well. Okay? Did you hear something like this?
No.
Okay. Could something like that have happened without you being able to hear it?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Were you paying attention to the noise of the ground and pound that you were watching?
Probably not. I was just seeing to make sure if it was serious or not, and that's when I went back inside.
Okay. Have you ever heard the sound of a skull being smacked against concrete?
I can't remember.
Have you heard the sound of a fist driving into a nose or a head or a face?
I can't remember.
So while it wasn't the histrionics that Mr. Delarounde suggested, it certainly it could have occurred that Mr. Trayvon Martin was hitting Mr. Zimmerman, but you just don't remember today the sound of that?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained. Rephrase your question.
Sure, I'll rephrase it. You're certainly not telling this jury that you're certain that Mr. Martin wasn't striking George Zimmerman in the face, right?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. You're certainly not telling this jury that you know that Mr. Martin was not striking George Zimmerman in the face. You just
I
don't-
can't 100% confirm that that was happening.
Right. And you just don't want to say that Trayvon Martin was taking George Zimmerman's head and hitting it on the cement because you didn't actually see that, correct?
Yeah, I couldn't see that.
Okay. And it was because of the darkness and the positioning of the people?
Yes.
Okay. You, of course, have testified during your deposition and other times regarding what you heard and the disparity or the seeming disparity between what you remember hearing and what the 911 call seems to indicate, right?
If you're referring to the call you played in my deposition, yes.
Yes. It just doesn't seem like the same screams to you, does it?
Well, one's coming from an audio and one I was hearing in person, so it didn't sound the same to me.
So
no.
you perceived them differently than you heard on the 911 call, correct?
Yes.
You're certainly not suggesting to this jury that they're not the same screams from different perspectives, are you?
I couldn't say.
Okay. You are aware that Ms. Lauer's call to 911 was timed perfectly with the screams that she heard and, of course, the gunshot that you heard, correct?
What do you mean?
Okay. You heard the gunshot, correct?
Correct.
And you've also heard that gunshot on Ms. Lauer's tape, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So going back in time from the gunshot backwards on Ms. Lauer's tape, you heard on Ms. Lauer's tape that there was probably 40 seconds worth of screaming that was recorded on that call, correct?
Objection is speculation in terms of the time.
He can testify if he knows.
Sure.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. You remember listening. I tell you what, here's what we'll do. If we might just have a moment, I'm going to let you listen to Ms. Lauer's call again. And I want you, when you're listening to it, I want you to think through, I'll tell you that 45 seconds into the phone call, you're going to hear the gunshot. Mm-hmm. So be ready for that, because I want you to then testify what you remember seeing sort of in timeline with when you remember hearing the shot. Okay?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I'm going to let you hear the tape, and then we'll go from there. If I might have a moment to set that up, Your Honor. And just for the record purposes, Your Honor, I'll identify the exhibit number in just a moment. This is, of course, the evidence of Ms. Lauer's telephone call that's already been put in evidence.
It's number 158.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. If you're ready. Sure.
Same 911, do you need police, fire, medical?
Maybe both, I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming outside.
Okay, what's the address that they're near? Is this in the Twin Lake Town, in Sanford?
Yes.
Okay, and is it a male or female?
It sounds like a male.
And you don't know why?
I don't know why. I think they're yelling help, but I don't know. Just send someone quick. Say stop.
Okay, does he look hurt?
I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on. So they're sending him.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your phone number?
There's gunshots.
You just heard gunshots?
Yes.
Okay. You heard the gunshot towards the end of what the recording?
Yes.
Okay. And I know, again, from different perspectives, but with your knowledge of the information of this case, that was the same gunshot that you heard from inside your house?
It didn't sound the same. It sounded more like a rock hitting my window because I was inside.
Of course. But I'm saying with your knowledge of the case now and your testimony here, you know it was the same gunshot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounded much different from across the street, if you will, across the pathway and inside Miss Lauer's apartment, correct?
Correct.
You didn't hear your voice on that tape, though, did you?
No.
You obviously did say what you said to them, correct?
Correct.
And the mere fact that it doesn't show up on the tape doesn't suggest that you didn't say it, does it?
I know what I said.
Okay. Just wasn't recorded on the tape.
You're also talking about someone that's probably inside their house, and I'm
Sure.
around
Not
the corner.
challenging you, I'm sorry. Not challenging you. Ms. Lauer said she heard you as well. I'm not challenging what you said or not, just that it wasn't on the tape. Using that gunshot as a reference point, I want to sort of take you back in time just a little bit. Just before the call, a few seconds before the call, is when you turned around and went back inside your condo or your townhome? Is that accurate?
You said a few seconds before I made the call?
Before the gunshot? So using the gunshot as a point of reference, because you remember hearing the gunshot when you were dialing 911, correct?
I was inside, correct.
Yeah. So I'm trying to go backwards in time, if you don't mind me trying it this way. So you know the gunshot that you heard here was the gunshot that you heard, correct? Let's just go back. And when that gunshot happened, you were on the phone to 911? Or just
I was waiting
dialing?
for someone to pick me up, correct.
Okay. And then, of course, we heard your 911 call that says, just heard a gunshot.
Correct.
So your 911 call starts after the gunshot, correct?
Correct.
And it was only a few seconds before that gunshot that you were outside looking at the two individuals in the ground and pound positioning.
Correct.
You are certain, are you not, that it was the person on the bottom who was yelling to you?
Not 100% certain.
I'm sorry?
Not 100% certain. But it did sound like it was coming from the person on the bottom.
So when you say not 100%, I just want to drill into that a little bit. And again, knowing that you want to be literal and very cautious with what you testify to, but using your common sense, when you were listening to the sound of the yelling, where was it coming from?
It sounded like the person on the bottom.
And was it coming as though it was coming straight towards you, unobstructed?
I would say yes.
Could you relate any of those two helps, or how many helps did you hear?
It could have been 1, 2, possibly 3. I think it was only a few.
Okay, just a few. Could you relate those, now that you've listened to this tape, where that you may have heard those yelps or helps on this tape?
No.
The yells that you heard, however, or the helps that you heard, however many there were, it was always the same voice, correct?
That I personally heard?
Yes.
Yes.
There was no second voice yelling anything, was there?
Not that I heard.
And when you ran outside, or when you went outside that time that you went out to your porch, you actually told him to stop, right?
I said, what's going on? Cut it out. Stop.
Cut it out.
Something like that.
Okay. And the person who we now know to be Trayvon Martin on top didn't stop, did he?
No one stopped.
He didn't even acknowledge that you were there?
I don't remember seeing anyone turn around.
Did he turn and look at you even?
No.
He just kept doing what he was doing,
Yes.
even though you asked him to stop?
I guess I asked him yes.
Mr. Delarianda asked you about a gun. You never saw a gun, did you?
No.
There wasn't a gun in anybody's hands that you could see, was there?
Not that I could see.
Did it seem like Mr. Zimmerman was trying, I'm talking now about the period of time where the ground and pound was occurring, the straddling. Did it seem like Mr. Zimmerman was trying to get up?
I didn't watch it long enough to even be able to tell on that. I might have stated when they were in the other position, it possibly looked like that, but not in the sidewalk part.
Oh, okay. And again, truly do appreciate you focusing on what you said and when you said it. But when they were one on top of the other before Mr. Martin got into the straddle position, that's when it looked to you like George was trying to get up, George Zimmerman was trying to get up?
Yes.
Okay. And how was he doing that?
Well, there's a person on top of him. I didn't think he wanted to stay on the ground.
Yeah, I'm just trying, if you would, for the jury to describe how it was that you saw Mr. Zimmerman trying to get up from the position with Trayvon Martin on top of him.
I couldn't tell you how he was trying to get up.
Can you just describe it for us?
What do you want me to describe if I can't tell you what it looked like?
Just trying to visualize for the jury what it was that when you said the guy in the bottom trying to get up, what you meant by that.
Like I said, if a person's on top of you, you're not wanting to stay on the ground. So once again, rationally thinking, I was thinking the person on the bottom would be trying to get up.
And did you see any movements by George Zimmerman to accomplish that? Or was it just sort of a struggle that you saw him trying to get up?
I couldn't see anyone when I first went out there until he slid out from where I could